Everybody, you really are ready for a break. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning. Can I welcome everybody to this public meeting of the Board of the Institute of Health Metrics and Evaluation here in Washington. Can I acknowledge that there are a good number of people in the room with us, staff, faculty, the board, the majority of the board, our former chairman emeritus. But can I also acknowledge that we have some people here who are visiting from, for example, Singapore, and we have a number of people who will be joining us virtually. That includes, I'm hoping, yes, Leah, who is joining us virtually, another board member, and of course, this is a public session and we are broadcasting this for anybody who wishes to pay attention and listen to our discussions this morning. So to all of those people out there, we welcome you as well to this public meeting. Can I acknowledge at the start that because obviously people are mindful of resource use and a series of other issues, we weren't able to conduct what we would normally have done, which was to meet with more staff last evening on behalf of the board, and we will record this formally. Can I acknowledge the work of the very many staff of the Institute, the fantastic work that we can see reflected in the board papers that we've been presented with. The achievements are many. They do reflect a very serious level of endeavour, thought, and plain old hard graft by people both here, but also people who work for the Institute more broadly. And on behalf of the board, I'd like to thank everybody for that work, that scholarship, and I think their continuing focus on issues that are important in respect of global health. So for those who aren't joining us virtually, we will send something to people to acknowledge this, but I would ask for those people who are attending either here in person or virtually, just to reflect those good wishes on behalf of the board to your colleagues across the Institute. As is always the case with these meetings, we've actually got a pretty busy agenda. We've got a number of matters which are obviously very important to the future of the Institute. We've also got a report, for example, from our Scientific Advisory Committee. Peter Piot, known to us all very well, will be joining us virtually. So unless there are any other issues that people wish to raise, my proposal is we get cracking with the agenda. And we will turn to a stellar cast of staff. But Chris, I'll leave it to you to manage. Over to you. Thank you.
Okay, I think I'm starting off and then passing on to Kara.
Mm-hmm.
Great. And if I start talking about Kara's slides, somebody stop. The reminder of our vision and mission remains the same for IHME. And then just, there we go. A little of sort of high level numbers as a reminder about where we are on IHME, about a $91 million budget. Head count is around about 470. We run a very large collaboration, produce nearly 400 papers, and substantial media coverage as well as website traffic. Now, we've divided the key achievements document. We're not following the exact order of the document. We've clustered what are, quite a disparate set of key achievements into these 6 buckets. And I'm going to start with some of the key achievements that relate to our impact outs beyond IHME. And here are some of those key achievements in words. I won't read it to you because you've seen the board documents, but I will cover some of them in a little bit more detail. Whoops. Okay, whoops, go back. So one of the key achievements is our continuing to nurture and actually expand our GBD collaboration. And we have introduced tiers into the collaboration. So we have four tiers. Tier 4, which is the top tier of people who have a very long history of working and taking on responsibility, either for particular diseases, risks, or leading expertise in certain areas, all the way down to tier 1. We do have requirements now to have people do training courses to go from tier 1 to tier 2. So we're trying to put more structure. But despite those barriers, in a sense, we continue to grow, and here's the global distribution. Now, these 16,000 plus collaborators come from almost 3,000 institutions. And you can see the clustering in certain countries where we have a very strong presence of institutions in India, in certain countries in Europe, in Nigeria, Ethiopia, and of course the US and China. We have also had quite a lot of effort on building regional or local networks of collaborators so that they become quite self-sufficient. And perhaps the oldest network and the one that is a good model for that self-sufficient local group is our network of Brazilian collaborators. They put out a series of 13 policy relevant papers this year. And they have weathered, interestingly, 2 changes of government from left to right to left, and then have maintained their influence with the Ministry of Health through that political storm. And I think it's just because of the maturity of that collaboration. Rafael Lozano, who you will remember, is now based in Mexico and has been facilitating a Latin American network. They've published a series of papers, and they have expanded the number of countries in this Latin American network during the course of the year. Our Italian collaborators have become quite organized, and they have produced a series of papers. I believe we have a visit coming from some of the Italian network later this summer or in the fall. And they had a meeting with, I think, 60 collaborators in March of 2025. Another group that are highly organized are the Nordic collaborators. So you've heard in the past about our close collaboration with Trondheim, with NTNU and Trondheim, with Stein Emil and the forecasting team, he being based in Bergen. But in addition, the Danish, Norwegian, Swedish, and I believe Finnish collaborators meet regularly, and for example, they had a 3-day workshop. They also had a visit here to IHME, I guess it was last year. And then we have an enormous collaboration in Ethiopia, and that has been led by the Ethiopian Public Health Institute in Addis. One of the interesting, they both produce a lot of publications, but they've also had, and our board member, former Minister Leah Tedesse, can speak to the influence that they've also continued to have on the Ministry of Health. We have been building up our collaborations in Asia. So Marie is here from NUS, and Marie led a series of papers on ASEAN, 4 papers that came out, and a range of policy briefs. And that's the start for further work with NUS in the future. We've had both visits and a number of papers and collaborations with South Korea, with Yonsei and Kyung universities. And we had a visit with one of the leaders of that group here in May. And I will go visit them in early October as well. And Thailand, we had a GBD workshop. And I think that's particularly interesting because they have been running on sort of a legacy program of burden of disease that predates GBD 2010 and all this sort of modernization, because they got trained up by Steve Lim or Steve and Theo Voss years ago and had kept trundling along with the old technology. So we're happy to see the Thais coming on board to the newer approaches. Now, another key achievement was the production and publication under the leadership of Mohsen Nagavi, who's in the room. There's Mohsen, on forecasting AMR. We heard the news as well that not only has this work led to the measure to be monitored in the UN high-level meeting on AMR to be based on what we've been doing, which is AMR-associated deaths. But interestingly, the Lancet has now thoroughly beaten the New England Journal again in the impact factor races by a count of 10. At least I am told by our in-house expert on publication metrics that the reason that they won is because of the AMR paper and the rather large citation count. So we're writing a letter to Elsevier asking for them to fund IHME in the AMR.
Sally, who would have thought?
So very successful. Thank you, Sally, for forcing us, shall we say, to.
I did get you some funding
You
too.
certainly did, but you also made us work very hard. Okay, and in the AMR scenarios, we also start to demonstrate what I think we'll see in the Commission on Global Threats work come to full fruition, which is just the utility of scenario forecasting, where we have forecasts of scenarios for AMR, and this really does appeal to even to the Crown Prince in the UK. So it's a very appealing framework, and I think you'll see more and more of this from what we produce in the future. Slightly different topic. Reflecting our post-COVID return to travel, and given our new financial system in the university, this was a important effort by our team here to overhaul our travel reimbursements that made it possible for us to go back to traveling more substantially, which really has an important role for us to engage with the world. Now, we have had funding and teams here at IHME working on brain health. This is work that Bill Heisel and colleagues have helped facilitate the relationships with a number of actors. And this is starting to come to fruition, where we had put out a brain health atlas. And we've had a stream of work on the economics of brain health shown here, which is looking at all the data under Angela and Joe's leadership of what is the evidence on the lost income, caregiver costs for brain health, particularly dementias, but not just. So, and that is being presented at a number of high-level forum, World Economic Forum, and World Health Assembly, and others. Now, we have had for, is it 2.5 years? A collaboration with Microsoft, AI for Good Lab, and the satellite company Planet. And I'm glad to say that we are finally at the point where we will be launching in Geneva in 2 weeks, the public release of our precision mapping of population. This is quarterly because the satellite data we process by quarter. And so the idea is to deliver very timely information on where people live. And then there's all sorts of applications. One that we'll be highlighting in Geneva is the use for the UN's early warnings for all initiative, where we can combine the precision population maps with access to online connectivity, so that we can identify people who wouldn't receive messages for storms or other early warnings, which is one of the Secretary General's initiatives. There are many, many applications. This is just one that is out in front on this precision mapping. Precision mapping also feeds into our climate risk assessment, because climate is very, very local, particularly things like flooding. And here's a preview of our product built by Microsoft. I mean, we've made the population, and they've tried to put some interesting visuals where you can zoom around and see visuals and look at population in different ways, which is very, the dynamic version is really quite interesting. We will launch that on July 8th, and then make available on application. People want to use it for various things, the detailed population numbers. We will, by the end of the year, hopefully have a full-time series back to 1975, and soon after, unclear whether it's early next year, we're hoping for forecast out to 2100 at this 40-meter resolution. So very, very highly resolved, very useful for all sorts of applications. I believe, last thing was the commission. We've supported a lot the work of the commission on 21st century global threats. Here's a reminder of commissioners that include a number of our board members and many others. And the commission started off in December 2022, and we are now through all our in-person meetings and side meetings. And very excitingly, we will be submitting for peer review the commission report in July or early August. And hopefully the plan is, once through the peer review process, we will be launching the Munich Security Conference in first quarter of next year. So, and that's really been a catalyst for the forecasting team, for the work on climate. It has been catalyzed by the commission, and I think it's opened up a new avenue for the future, where we will do more of this type of scenario assessment and quantification of what's amenable to change in the future for wide range of threats. I'm going to pass over to Kara, who will go through GBD related accomplishments.
Thank you, Chris. Hi, I'm Kara, Manager of Research Operations here. And these are the key achievements, just a sliver of the many things accomplished on GBD, but the ones that we'll be highlighting today. This is sort of a summary of the scope of GBD 2023. In general, most of these numbers increase over time by adding on years and additional diseases and injuries and risk factors. And for the most part, we're increasing in the number of locations that we add as well. This is a summary of publications on GBD separated by in-network, which means that the paper includes a co-author that's either somebody from IHME or a member of our collaborator network, and then versus out of network in the dark blue and showing the trends over time. It was just over a year ago that GBD 2021 was released in the year 2024 there. And so that big release combined with the growing collaborator network, unsurprisingly, we see that increase in the number of GBD publications. 2025 is shown, but of course, we're only partway through the year, so we'll expect that to continue the trend upwards. And then I have a few figures from our summary capstone papers. So we've finished estimation for GBD 2023, and the papers are under peer review with the Lancet. One of them has already been resubmitted, and the other two are working through responses to reviewer comments. This is a figure from our demographics capstone. We've got females on the left and males on the right, and kind of showing time trends along the bottom. And then it's broken apart by GBD super regions on the top and SDI quintiles on the bottom, just showing trends in life expectancy.
What happened in 1960?
Famine.
The Great Leap Forward, otherwise known as the Great Chinese Famine.
Thank you.
Very, yeah. Very easy to see in this type of figure. So overall life expectancy for females increased globally from 51 years in 1950 up to 76 years in 2023, and just a slightly smaller increase for males of 24 years over that same time period, from 48 years to 72 years. And then you can see the dip for the pandemic, and then now we have since increased, recovered from that back to 2019 levels of life expectancy. This is another figure from the paper, and also showing life expectancy. So you can see SDI shown on the x-axis there, and then life expectancy on the y-axis. The top figures for females, the bottom figures for males, and then showing time trends from 1950, 1990, 2023. And the black line represents the expected life expectancy based on SDI. So in general, as we would expect, there's life expectancy was positively associated with SDI, and it increased, both of these increased for all 204 countries and territories that we estimate in GBD from 1950 to 2023. But of course, there's quite a bit of variation, and some places performed better or worse, depending on their life expectancy. And this is from our summary capstone that includes both non-fatal and risk factors results. So kind of a common graph that we look at showing DALYs with number of DALYs at the top and age standardized rates at the bottom. And although altogether, the number of DALYs hasn't changed very much from 1990 all the way to 2023, you can kind of see the different trends by controlling for population aging and population growth on the bottom, with the age standardized graph, seeing the different trends among the different cause groupings, with red being communicable, maternal, neonatal, nutritional, blue is non-communicable. And then one additional figure from that same, from these results, this is risk factors. So the risk factors with the most burden at the top, and then down to the bottom, 20% of DALYs. This is for global. So globally, we can still see a mix of behavioral, metabolic, and environmental risk factors. Though if we look at this same graph for lower income countries or the low SDI countries, malnutrition is still at the very top, just like it was in 1990. Every round of GBD, for the most part, we add new granularity for the diseases that we estimate based upon a variety of reasons, more data availability, interest from collaborators, a percentage of deaths or DALYs that we hadn't been accounting for. And so first, we estimate them internally, and they get a lot of review and scrutiny. And then we publicly release them later. So those on the top there, those that'll be included in GBD 2023 release. And then those at the bottom are those that we've been estimating internally, and then pending approval will then be publicly released in GBD 2025. This, I think we've probably shown graphs like, or figures like these before. The intention is not, of course, to read the different boxes, but for our all-cause mortality estimation, over the many years of it being included in GBD had just become increasingly complex, with many different steps involved, and because of that, just time-consuming to go through. A lot of times, if you want to change one little thing, you kind of have to run through the whole process from the very beginning. And with many different steps, of course, that can be more error-prone. So we set out on a goal for GBD 2023 to radically simplify as well as improve the process of estimating all-cause mortality. With this, our goal is to no longer have separate models for under 5 mortality and adult mortality, to get rid of a model life table process that's been used since the 1960s, and instead switch to a single model to produce all-cause mortality. Not only does it simplify things, but it also improves the estimates a lot as well. So we're able to incorporate new types of data that we weren't able to include before, and it just makes it simpler, more transparent, and easier to evaluate as well. And it did allow us to accomplish our goals of removing the special treatment that we had for HIV as well as COVID-19.
And could you explain that to people who don't understand what that means?
The special treatment part?
Yes.
Maybe I'll let you have that one.
Because we were, like everybody in the demography, were using model life tables built in the 1960s when there was no HIV, they didn't work for HIV. So what would happen is you'd have this separate model over here for HIV mortality, and you would model a hypothetical world with no HIV in that country, and then you would just add it on. And it turns out the models that mathematical sciences here build could handle HIV. So we just started treating it like everything else. Same result.
Thanks, Chris. This is just one figure showing the differences at the global level and results. So GBD 2021, our last set of estimates in red, our new set of estimates with this new method in blue, and then a comparison to UN results as well. Overall, although this is at the global level, so you can't see location-specific or age-specific changes, some of the noteworthy changes were higher rates of adolescent mortality than previously estimated, higher rates of young adult mortality in females, as well as lower rates of mortality in older age groups in much of sub-Saharan Africa. Moving on to some other important publications and work that was accomplished over the last year. We had a series of papers published in The Lancet with forecasts on the prevalence of overweight and obesity. So we had one dedicated to the prevalence among children and adolescents, and that was in collaboration with the Center for Adolescent Research at the University of Melbourne, a second on adult prevalence, and then a third on US state level results. We got a lot of media coverage, which was very exciting and we hope will lead to policy changes. Over there on the right column of that next to just the celebrities there, so that's kind of cool to see. And yeah, very, very excited to get that coverage. This is just one of the plots from one of the papers showing trends for males versus females. The gap starts to widen in the adolescent time period there, and then it peaks for females at 49%, ages 50 to 54, and slightly earlier for males at 47% in the 45 to 49-year-old age group. This is a really interesting one and a compelling way to show the evolution of obesity rates over time, showing each generation getting worse. So we call this a cohort graph, and we've got females at the top and males at the bottom. X is age and y-axis is prevalence of obesity. And so if you take 1 point, for example, say for the age of 50, kind of in the middle of the chart there, the cohort that was born in 1930, which is one of those orangish colors, the maximum rate of obesity that they exhibited at the age of 50 was about 22%. Whereas if you jump to the cohort that was born in 1980, that's now reached a level of about 40%. And you can see that none of these lines cross. So every 5-year cohort is getting worse with rates over time.
Well, yeah,
It's going like
that's,
this, it's gonna be 100%.
Amazing.
yeah. It's,
We're gonna be Tonga amazing. You look at places that really
Yeah.
are getting into the 70s.
Small and small.
Tonga.
But isn't there like a GLP train coming at this?
So
yeah,
there's a GLP train, but here's the thing, I was at Novo and this is also why the CEO lost his job. But Novo Nordisk is only producing 20 million person doses. That's all they've reached so far in production. So they have this like cash cow and they're not able to scale production. So eventually maybe, but it's really tiny. You think about how many obese people there are in the world, the fraction who can get GLP-1s. So.
Also very active food industry counter GLP-1 research going on to put in food, so not clear how long the benefits of GLP-1 will be materialized in the future if the food industry counters it with.
How do they counter it?
I don't understand the chemistry. I have only read that they're trying to find chemical compounds that, because the GLP-1s interfere with your cravings, and the addiction center in the brain is one of the theories. So they're trying to release, I think, more dopamine by when the saliva activates some chemical that is an additive to the food. I don't really.
So you eat less, and if you eat less, they sell less.
Yeah, so now
They're trying to counter it.
they're trying to counter that.
That should get
So they're
policy,
putting
making
things.
activity.
Yeah.
I think you could regulate that out, you know.
Psychoactive food.
Exposed and.
There's a lot of money going into that from the food industry, from what I've read, so.
But the financial markets would suggest that food companies, some of the distribution companies, the alcohol companies are all under great deal of pressure because of the effect of GLP.
Yeah.
and smoking and gambling.
There's trials on
Yeah.
addiction right now.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
There's nothing fundamental that prevents them from making more.
Which is why that CEO lost his job. Because why couldn't they scale? There's something about viscosity, and so it's so hard to build new. So yes,
They'll figure.
they'll eventually figure it out for sure.
There's
right?
money to be made.
But then it'll be closer to off-patent, and then they won't make the same money.
And Manjaro will now.
Manjaro, exactly.
looks better anyway,
Yeah,
so I
yeah.
think Lily's gonna eat into Novo's
Pardon
market,
the pun.
yes. Pardon.
I won't spend a lot of time on this one, but this is another way of looking at it. And this is specifically focused on 15 to 24-year-olds with blue in the past and or kind of recent time periods, and then the green bars looking out into the future. So you see that continuing to move to the right with prevalence of obesity expected to go up, as we've discussed. Moving on to a different topic, I just want to highlight work on tobacco forecasting. And with that, and a publication that came out was also a new Viz tool. There's a small screenshot here so users can kind of explore the different scenarios and find the different proposal outcomes of smoking and for different locations. And with support from Bloomberg Philanthropies. On a slightly different topic, as we've shared many times, the GBD has billions of results, which provides a lot of opportunity for writing papers, but it can also be daunting and confusing and have some barriers to entry, especially for people in our collaborator network. And so a number of teams here at IHME collaborated together to create an online writing center that's available for both our internal staff and the collaborator network, and just helps really give more of a step-by-step guide of walking through the scientific publications process. It has, step-by-step trainings, documentation, job aids, and also helps people more closely follow our protocols. For papers on GDP. And then lastly, there was a lot of work done in the past few years, but culminating in this last year on intimate partner violence and sexual violence against children. This was done by our gender equality metrics team here and really represents the most comprehensive efforts to date to measure the global, regional, and national prevalence of these forms of violence. There was a ton of new data extraction to better capture all of the available sources on this, as well as the largest ever systematic review on the health consequences of this violence as well. This slide has a few highlights of very sobering results that were found through this work. And on this next slide is a figure showing the percent of DALYs for each condition attributable to sexual violence against children. And so through this work, they were able to capture a much higher proportion of the burden of mental disorders, eating disorders, substance use disorders, abortion and miscarriage, and others that are due to gender-based violence. And then I just have one more slide, which shows the ranking of the leading risk factors. So looking specifically at females ages 15 to 49, you can see that intimate partner violence and sexual violence against children are the number 4 and 5 risk factors at the global level, but then also very high for all the regions here too.
I presume this data are rely on people reporting the fact, the hospital and police and.
It's mainly reporting and surveys. So.
So you don't think they're underestimated?
Oh, I certainly think they're underestimated. We've tried to correct it for children because we have multiple sources and we have some better ways of capturing exposure during childhood. But I would say we're still underestimating. But we've also tried to use police and administrative data, but the level of reporting is an order of magnitude lower than surveys.
That's it for me. Ready to move on? Over to you, Linda.
All right, good morning. So Kara and Chris mentioned some of the papers that we worked on the forecasting team over the last year. But we've been particularly focused on climate recently and capturing the effects of climate change in our forecasts. So I'll go through some of that work and then I will pass it off to Joe to talk about some of the financing work. So we've had several teams working together at IHME to produce forecasts for various pathways through which we think climate change can impact population health. So we're using CMIP 6 climate projections, so projections of temperature and precipitation and other climate variables from the CMIP 6 models. And then using those to produce climate sensitive forecasts for all of these different pathways. So that includes child malnutrition, the direct effects of temperature, both of cold and of heat, particulate matter, air pollution, and wildfires, floods, including direct, flood deaths as injuries, but also cholera exposure following a flood, vector-borne diseases, so including malaria and dengue, and then tropical storms as well. And we've integrated all of this into the Future Health Scenarios platform so we can understand sort of the totality of the effects across all of these pathways and look at that by cause, by region, et cetera. So when we put it all together, we estimate about 74 million deaths cumulatively from 2025 to the end of the century. What we're calling the amenable burden. So that is the deaths from the most pessimistic climate scenario, which is RCP 8.5, and then 2.6, which is our optimistic climate scenario, and about 1.8 billion YLLs. So those constitute about 1% of the total deaths in YLLs over that same timeframe. We can also break this down by cause. So this is showing the global amenable YLLs by year across the level 2 causes in the GBD hierarchy. So the horizontal line at 0, any color above that means we're expecting more deaths from those causes as a result of climate change, and anything below is fewer deaths. So the orange sort of the orange bar at the top is diabetes and kidney disease, followed by gray is chronic respiratory, red is cardiovascular disease, and the sort of neon blue is respiratory infections. So those are the major cause groups that we expect to see increases in burden as a result of climate change. The brown color that's below that horizontal line is driven by malaria, where our models actually suggest that under a warmer climate, we're actually going to see at the global level fewer deaths from malaria because mosquitoes don't like really hot, dry places. So a lot of the areas where malaria currently proliferates, we expect to see fewer malaria transmission. That, of course, varies regionally. We've done all of this analysis at a gridded scale, so there's variation, but the totality of the effect is actually fewer malaria deaths.
And can you explain to us what you think the mechanism is that leads to, for example, that increase in diabetes and kidney disease and the relationship?
That is, I'll get to that, but it's driven primarily by the increases, the direct effects from temperature and also air pollution. Those are the two primary pathways that are leading to the increase in the non-communicable disease deaths. Yeah. And then you'll also notice there's a few thinner bars at the bottom, black cancers, some neurological, some digestive diseases, and that is a function of the competing risk dynamic within our framework. So as people are dying, of cardiovascular disease from climate change, there are fewer people living longer and then dying of other causes like cancers or digestive diseases. So that is sort of baked into our framework, and we think a big advantage of the dynamic nature of our model. So Jane, to your point, we tried to break these sort of global results down across the pathways that we've been modeling. And so the vast majority of the change in amenable YLLs that we see is driven by the direct effects of temperature and also from air pollution and wildfires. Child malnutrition and floods and tropical storms make up a much smaller share of the change. And the net effect from the vector-borne diseases, which is driven by malaria, is of course countering those effects. We can look at this is all age. We can look at this for under 5. We can look at it by location. So there's a lot of ways to sort of dive into these results. And then if we look at this by geography, this is the difference in life expectancy in 2100 between RCP 8.5 and 2.6. And so you'll see a loss of life expectancy primarily concentrated in Africa and the Sahel and parts of the Middle East, North Africa, and South Asia. There are some West African countries where you actually see a gain in life expectancy, and that is being driven by these malaria findings. And then up in the northern hemisphere in Scandinavia, the UK, and Iceland, you also see some gains in life expectancy, and that is because the reduction in deaths that we're seeing from cold are outweighing any increase in deaths that we're seeing from heat. I believe that's it for me. I'll pass it to Jill. Thank you.
So the health financing team has been quite busy over the last year as well. As a reminder, we're kind of half focused on global work and half on the US. So these first two slides are about our global work. One of the probably most important contributions we've made this year is making 2025 estimates of development assistance for health that take into consideration the huge cuts that we're seeing from many governments, including the US. Our estimate is that there's a 22% reduction in development assistance from health from 2024 to 2025. And really the US is playing a much smaller role in kind of leading the charge in providing development assistance for health. In the past, the US had always provided at least a quarter of all development assistance for health. And now we see that that's closer to 12%. The countries that are impacted the most are the countries in bright red in the map on the bottom, particularly sub-Saharan Africa. These countries are seeing a reduction in total health spending unless they're able to compensate with their own resources dramatically of 15 to 20%. So essentially a 1 in 5 cut in resources for healthcare. So this translates into essentially a loss in resources for the health sector. We have a large work stream right now that feeds into the Gates Foundation's Goalkeeper report that looks at quantifying the health loss associated with those reductions in development assistance. And so the figures on the top highlight our kind of means of estimating that. It uses a frontier analysis and essentially looks at holding constant efficiency or inefficiency, it holding constant and seeing reductions in spending and what that leads to. This figure specifically is looking at under 5 mortality, but we're using this method to quantify health loss in quite a few health indicators, I think 11 or 12 for the Goalkeeper. Switching over to our US research, we have, after really about 3 years of work, produced a set of estimates at the county level for healthcare spending and utilization. These were published in a pair of papers in the JAMA family in middle of February. They've been viewed about 40,000 times since then. And we've also produced an interactive visualization. You see the snippet on the right of kind of the drop-in screen that really allows, especially state policymakers, to kind of customize what they want to see. So if they're interested in looking at spending per beneficiary, then they can do that with a specific payer for their state. They can zoom in, they can see changes over time. It really, again, kind of customizes what is accessible. One of the most exciting things we've done in the dissemination side from this research is these, we've produced a series of state spending briefs, just 2-pagers that kind of highlight the important trends that we see in each one of the states. We've done a good job of essentially reaching out and making those available to state policymakers and stakeholders. And as a consequence, it's led to about 30 total meetings with different agencies to just walk through the results and explain how they can be useful for them. We've done 26 state briefings, but we've also done a number of briefings with organizations like the American Diabetes Association and others. So there's been really nice pickup from especially stakeholders and policymakers of this research. Over to Laura.
So also in sort of the US space, but existing a little bit in parallel to our normal streams of US work that I talked about yesterday, we had the opportunity to publish a special series on US burden of disease last year in the Lancet. This was timed to come right after the presidential election, and they sort of branded it as a presidential briefing book. It included 5 articles. There was 2 led by my team, one looking at disparities of well-being in the US using a kind of novel adaptation of the Human Development Index, and then one on looking at disparities in life expectancy by the 10 Americas, which I'll come back to on a subsequent slide. There was also the paper that Kara mentioned about overweight and obesity forecasting in the US, and then 2 led by Ali and the forecasting team looking at burden of disease, currently and retrospectively in the US, and then disease scenarios looking forward. There's also correspondence by Joe and his team on global development assistance for health and the viewpoint by Chris and Ali. A lot of work went into disseminating this series, attempting to get it out there, I think, pretty successfully. So there was a launch event that was co-hosted by the Council on Foreign Relations and The Lancet. There was also, similar to what Joe was just showing for the spending, a series of reports put together for different states, territories, and nationals. You can see an example there for the state of Michigan. Different folks have used those data in different ways. So you can see it cited sometimes in policy documents that various people put together, including Senator Bernie Sanders, Washington State Legislature, and so on. There were individual briefings with a bunch of different groups that you can see there. And there was also a broader webinar that had about 300 or so people, including officials from 18 states and 6 federal agencies. A lot of papers, but I'm going to show just one example from one of the papers. So some of you may remember the 8 Americas paper, which was published back in 2006. The 10 Americas paper is essentially an update and a redo of that. We added 2 additional Americas for the US Latino population, which is possible now, but was not possible when the original paper was published. And the basic idea behind both papers is to take US population and to group people on the basis of their location, their racial and ethnic group, their income, and in some cases, the residential segregation of where they're living. And to do that in a relatively small and manageable number of groups so that you can look at disparities across all these different dimensions without being kind of overwhelmed by the number of different groups that you would get if you did the full cross product. So the plot here shows the trends in life expectancy for the 10 Americas from 2000 to 2021. In the year 2000, which overlaps with the original study, we see very, very large disparities in life expectancy. That is consistent with the original study. What's interesting is that in the original study, the disparities were pretty constant over time, but what we find now, especially when you look from 2000 onwards, and particularly once you get to the COVID era, is that the disparities have been pretty steadily increasing, particularly when you compare the top to the bottom group. And they exploded in COVID because the effect of the drop in life expectancy from 2019 to 2020 was so different. And then even more so in 2021 because the groups that were at the top started to recover while the rest of the groups continued to decline. In the paper, though not on this slide, we also looked at differences in income and education by the 10 Americas, and there are some similar patterns, so we're pretty confident that income and education explains some of what's going on, but it's also very clear that it does not explain the totality. That's it for me.
I think this one's a little bit out of order. You wanna, Chris, I think you were gonna go through one mod. Here.
Is that here or? Okay. So you heard earlier about simplification for all-cause mortality. That's driven by the development by math sciences and computational algorithms of one mod. And now we're in the business of changing our cause of death modeling from a system that we developed in around about 2010 called cause of death ensemble modeling to one mod. The main advantage of this is we get models go from running in 2 weeks to running in a couple of hours. So that's a huge lift, and we get slightly better out of sample performance and substantially better in sample fit. So we sort of pay no price for the improved computation. And we plan to see this modeling environment rolled out both to external users in the collaboration, because it's possible, as well as through modeling risk factor and some disease exposures. There are interestingly 2 parts to one mod. There's a sort of traditional model building part that is sort of handy because it fits the relationship between an outcome and covariates by age, but allows those covariates to be correlated over age. And you can do that in any dimension you want. So that's actually a pretty, in the past, where we thought maybe the relationship between, say, education and diarrhea was different in kids than adults, we would actually have to build separate models. But this handles it very nicely because it says the relationship can be different, but it's related in the dimension of age. In principle, it could be related in any dimension. It also allows us to have correlated, unexplained, temporal variation that's not explained by covariance. We can have that correlated over age and over space. The second part, which is why we get better in-sample fits, and remember, we want to have good in-sample fits because for the burden of disease, we want to remove noise from the data and say what is the sort of underlying trend. And so this little cartoon sort of, I think, is the best explanation I've had for the idea about kernel regression, which is basically, think of the SPX model, the traditional model, as this blanket on the left that's very stiff, and it doesn't actually fit the data very well. And we have a little knob in K-reg in the kernel reduction that makes the blanket as soft as you want, and it can just sort of fall in place into the data on the right. Now, there's an art form here because you can, in these models are so good at following the data, you could have it follow the data exactly. And you don't want that because the data has noise in it. Right, so and the way we figure this out is we do a bunch of in-sample and out-of-sample testing, and essentially you want to, in a classic economist view, you have a production possibilities frontier, what's possible, and you have a utility function, which is what's your trade-off between the in-sample and the out-of-sample, and you're finding the point that gives you the best of both that fits your values for your utility. And so we do that actually, and behind the scenes by cause, we basically get the production possibilities frontier of in-sample and out-of-sample using these two tools or the two control knobs that we have, and then we get the blanket to be just soft enough. Okay, and here's some evidence of that in-sample and out-sample, and basically we are doing a better job in and out of sample, and so it's pretty nice. And in fact, there's an ongoing research stream about having built this framework of further tuning, right? I don't think we're done yet at eking out optimization from the application of the tool. And so Sasha and Bong and their postdocs are busily trying to figure out how to do more of that tuning. And week by week, we seem to be seeing some progress as well. Okay. Oh, there we go. More of that we can skip. And I'll pass back to Kimberly.
All right. Thanks, Chris. I am Kimberly Cooper, Director of Data Solutions and Experimental Technology. I'm going to represent some of our engineering and tech team accomplishments for the year. This slide that was a little out of order that we skipped over, I'll just talk through it real quickly. It represents a huge amount of work that Caitlin Steiner's central computation teams have been doing to re-engineer our GBD pipelines to support these new tools like OneMod that Chris was just showing. And part of the joy of these new tools is that they allow us to estimate on point estimates with a reduced amount of draws for uncertainty. But instead of carrying 500 or 1,000 draws forward through each step of the process, they allow us to actually estimate on points. So to take advantage of that, that meant re-engineering the entire GBD pipeline from an engineering point of view. So Caitlin's team has put in place, starting to actually implement in production along with OneMod for cause of death, what we are cleverly calling PERD, point estimates and reduced draws, architectural stack, which involves Parquet files and PyArrow. So it's pushed us forward to use some actual the century level tooling, which has reduced storage. And it's even more importantly, potentially allowing us to reduce the amount that we move data around. Because, with these hundreds of terabytes worth of estimates at the intermediate level, having to then upload them, move them from one place to another in order to visualize them, just gets in the way of our teams being able to vet. So in this scenario, we are able to leave them in place, visualize in place. That's a fantastic accomplishment. The other accomplishment that her central computation teams have been doing this year involves re-engineering our custom scenarios pipeline for forecasting. And I think that you heard, Amanda talking about all of the custom scenarios that we've been needing to run both with Lancet Commission for the climate work. I believe it's about 50 custom scenarios had to be run across all of that work. And so this was allowed us to actually do this without, in the past, we would have to re-estimate even pieces that were not changing within the scenarios. That's really the big change, is it allows us to keep some of that in place and just re-estimate the pieces that we absolutely need to change for that custom scenario. So you can see the reductions in storage and compute costs there. Okay. Getting on to some of our other tech teams, we're going to look across these 4 key achievements. And I am the last presenter, by the way, but you. So our Viz team was able to really make a big push forward in translations across our Viz tools. We have these 7 languages now in production. And you can see how this expands our reach out of English language impact. But also to be clear, I think one of the main reasons that we picked the particular languages that we did was not just the breadth, but also our strong partnerships in some of these regions. And so really actually being able to honor those partnerships and it allowed us to use both AI translation approaches as well as actually expert in-country approaches. And we're able to kind of vary that ratio depending on what our level of collaboration and interest is in the country in actually having a say and in vetting how those translations are applied. Here is a picture of how we have been able to include support for right to left language layouts, which is one of the bigger issues we had to solve for there. Okay, representing infrastructure and engineering collaboration. This has been a huge amount of work this year to continue our migration of public-facing applications into a public network piece of our cloud environment. This picture is a little bit kind of showing where we stand right now. So on the left, we have our UW data centers on our internal network. The compute cluster, internal Viz tools, internal GHGX are all properly situated there. The things at the bottom, the public-facing Viz tools, are the ones that we're working on actually moving out here to this public network so that the public internet will not in the future cross this firewall at all. It will be completely isolated, be completely segmented. So the progress that we've made to date, all of our all of our website products, healthdata.org and the external public GHDX are in that public network. Our first tool, AMR Microbe, is now live out there, and we have quite a large array of staging databases that we have been working on, testing, figuring out how to actually use this secure tunnel. And what that means is that there's no actual standing connection between our areas in green here and the areas in red on the public network. So teams needing to move data, they will instantiate a tunnel. This is a secure, one single use. They'll transfer the data. The tunnel then is collapsed. So that's a.
Can I ask one?
Yeah.
Is the growth in your data storage even across all of these platforms or concentrated in one of them?
That is a very good question. The biggest amount of data is going to be actually in the blue and the pink. Because our intermediate data, our draw level data, and our archive data vastly outweighs the size of the data that we make public facing. Not to say that this is small.
Right.
That was really-
Can you
wondering where the
dimensionalize
growth
that
is.
for us? I'm sorry, Jen.
No, I
didn't
was
mean
just
to
wondering
interrupt.
whether growth will.
The growth is I think,
Even across.
across, it's the same across. Yeah, each piece grows kind of linearly.
Sorry.
I was just asking, could you dimensionalize how much data we're talking about?
Yeah, let's see if there's anything on our next.
If that's coming, that's fine.
We have more in the afternoon session that will dive into the data part of it, data as an asset topic.
Okay.
But we still have a data gravity problem. Majority of the research data is in our data centers. And there is no way for us right now to put that on the cloud because it's just not cost effective.
What is our data now?
We have over 21 petabytes of data in the data center right now.
And we're in the, I would say hundreds of terabytes on the external facing piece. So that helps dimensionalize it. So this is where we're going.
All data.
It's, right, it's a lot of data.
It's a lot of data.
So yeah, this is just another picture of where we're headed with this. With all of the viz tools having been moved out. And then another piece that we're working on and is in progress is our essential business tooling being moved into the research cloud. So I glossed over it a little bit, but we do have two physically separated cloud instances that were both in Azure. One public facing, that public network in red, and one IHME research facing. So we have a very high data transfer, high speed connection there between our UW data centers and the Azure cloud, so that's circled there in green. So we're moving into that space with our internal enterprise business services. Any more questions on these one? This year we launched or about to launch. It is available publicly right now for a few key collaborators. It's a new data coverage and quality assessment tool. What this allows us to do is combine information that has been shared publicly previously in our data sources tool about the citations and underlying data sets with a visual look that allows us to actually convey where there are gaps in coverage, where we have excellent coverage on either a cause level, a location level, or a combination of the two, and then actually what those data sets are. So if you hover over any of these heat map bars, you will see then and be able to download the citations that are actually underlying the data in that space. And last but not least, very couple quick slides on our AI-assisted systematic review progress. I would also just mention that though we don't have slides on them, several of our AI initiatives that we've reported on past years are still going, still being used in production and at increasing scale, and that includes summarizing and classifying scientific paper comments. I think there were 160,000-ish comments so far processed for our GBD capstones. We are also using it at increasing scale for classifying and assigning shock events to location and type. That scale has gotten to the point where I think we had a high of about another 160,000 jobs running via our AI system, classifying that in one day. And then this is the piece that we're working on, currently onboarding staff to our MVP of title and abstract AI-assisted systematic review. In progress, working on article retrieval, full text and extraction in order to get to as close to our original idea of a living systematic review, which is in our core grant. We've never gotten there. We're still trying. We're pushing towards being able to chain together agents to actually do ongoing real-time monitoring of the scientific literature base and then make initial classifications and data extractions that can then be passed off to a human for review, acceptance, etc. Depending on how you all feel about getting into actually what's going on here, we can spend a little time or a lot of time, but one of the real benefits of using the Gen AI system for systematic review versus some of the older predictive AI models, which we also still use, is that we can really get in there and tune things and make it very transparent to the modeler. What they're actually optimizing for in terms of classification. And that allows then more use cases as well, from a very strict Prisma compliant review to a quick and dirty keeping on top of the literature. So in this case, what we're showing here is that in this case, we're prioritizing for recall.
What's a recall?
Meaning we're trying to avoid as many false negatives, trying to get false negatives down to 0. And so we will, in this case, then give up maybe a little bit of predictive power on true positives. And so we'll have to do more human review.
False negative worse than false positive?
Well, that's the point, like, about the ability to choose. The modeler, the researcher can choose whether they are more concerned about letting anything, missing one thing, or if they're more concerned about getting a broader, more comprehensive look at inclusions.
The answer to that is for relative risk.
Yeah.
We must miss nothing, because if we miss things, then people complain mightily. Whereas for description of a disease or a risk, where there's tons and tons of data, because remember on relative risk, there might be 20, there might be 100 studies, or there might be 5. But on the description of how many people smoke, there's thousands and thousands. So if we miss a few, we don't care. So the answer to that depends very much on which part of GPT.
And the source of the information, of the data is always studies, or could also be, I don't know,
Relative
hospital
risks
data,
must be published.
like raw data, or it has to be.
Just by the rules of the field, the relative risk part, which people really obsess by, is red meat bad for you or not, must be peer reviewed. And we don't bring in data that's not being through the process of peer review. For description, how much red meat you eat, we'll use all sorts of data, that hasn't gone through a peer review process. So again, it's also a little bit different, the balance of literature versus direct data from government, from ag surveys, from, FAO, you name it.
Okay, so this applies to reviews of that kind.
This is literature reviews, reviews of the scientific literature. We're also, although we don't have a slide about it, just because we're kicking it off now, working on an AI-assisted classification task that's very similar for our survey data. But it goes through a completely different pathway than, you can imagine a PDF journal article versus a SAS data set that you downloaded from a public health website. They go through different processes. So for the systematic review, the thing that allows us to then actually choose whether we're prioritizing on recall or whether we're actually trying to prioritize for a high true positive rate, for example. There's two parts in the system that enable you to choose that metric of optimization. And the first is let me just kind of walk you through what you would do. So you would have in this case, I had a spreadsheet that had about 200 outcomes of a previous systematic review for stroke. And so that's my training and validation data. Then I had about 3,000 new unlabeled data points from a new systematic review. Upload those together. The 200.
And that would be post the date of the first one.
Yeah,
So it's the
exactly.
new material in that period.
Yeah, got it. You could also, redo the review for
Yeah,
the
yeah,
whole
if you want it
period and
across the whole
see
thing, yeah.
if there are new things. So then the 200 labeled data sets are used in 2 points. The first point being to optimize your actual prompt. So there's a basic prompt. It says, you're an epidemiologist, you are trying to include and exclude based on these parameters for this disease. That's supplied by the modeler. But then we're using an AI implemented prompt optimization, which allows you to say, okay, I want to optimize this prompt for high recall, I want to optimize it for a high true positive rate or high accuracy, which is a balance.
How do you prompt the prompt?
How
How do you prompt the tool that does the prompting?
we prompt the tool that does the prompting. So this is all this is all embedded within our metric mind AI infrastructure, which allows us to hook via an API to any model on Azure Cloud. So in this case, probably one of the ChatGPT models. We are able then to pass prompts to the model itself. And then we're able to chain together actions of a variety of different models in the background and then return the results. So one of the steps, one of the agents in there is a prompt optimizer that says, okay, here's the prompt that you tried, human, it's fine, but you want to get to this, 100% in this particular metric. Here with these 200 labeled data points, I'm going to rewrite the prompt over and over and over for you until I get as high as I think I possibly can. And then I'm going to return that prompt to you. So when they do that, you can then use that prompt or discard it. Yeah, okay. And then move along.
So that's your performance feedback, Laura.
We need to prompt optimize health systems.
Prompt optimize it, absolutely. And then you can discard it if you don't like it. Well, we might measure that.
So then the next step is to then use that prompt and use the metric that you optimized it for to then classify the unlabeled data points. So it goes off and it classifies, comes back with its prediction. Then the cool thing at that point is you're given a threshold to choose. It's a confidence level threshold. How much confidence does the model have in its results? Your goal is to pick the threshold that is like the lowest confidence that still gives you a good result.
Yeah.
Because that means it's going to have classified more for you. But you can choose that threshold and then based on that threshold, download your data with a prediction for each new data point, new journal article based on that confidence level. And then you also get a workload summary, which says, okay, we have predicted based on this threshold that you've chosen that you would need to screen 23% of the articles and that would catch 265 in this case. You would miss potentially 45 of that would be a false negative right there. So obviously you could move that threshold all the way up to 100%, in which case you'd have to manually screen everything, but you wouldn't miss anything, right? And you can also move it around in the middle and try to get where you want to go. So we're pretty excited about this approach. Like I said, we're going to move on next to full text, although I would note that getting this level of performance on title and abstract only was something that we were concerned that we wouldn't be able to do. So we're pretty excited we were able to do it just on title and abstract. All right. That's it.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No.
Further questions from the board member? That I think that last one's gonna do my head in for a while.
Yeah, you're gonna get a question later, still.
Yeah, it's being processed, I can hear it.
Can I ask the question about,
Yeah.
we're using quite a lot of AI on the back end for staging, manipulating the data, so forth. Have we done any experimentation on authoring papers?
Even having write the papers?
Yeah.
We did sorry, you said yes.
The early adopter leaned forward.
Yeah, we have been working on prototypes of basically writing agents. And, giving it, for example, outlines and then getting AI to fill in those outlines. And you can give it example documents to work on in terms of style. So
Here's all the prior papers that we've done on the subject. Yeah.
And that's something that we've been kind of prototyping.
And then they'll be
Creating your own
reviewed by an
collaborators.
AI, and they'll be read by an AI, there'll be no humans in that.
I mean, I'm not asking it as a facetious question. Other, I mean, like law firms and so forth are doing a lot of first draft
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
It is the future.
Similarly for grant proposals.
Pardon me?
Similarly
Yeah,
for
for grant
grant proposals, you can leverage some of the AI capabilities that amplify bullet points into whatever length the funder
Right,
wants.
fluffy,
Well,
well,
I know for an example that because a lot of those are public, for at least the public institutions, that concentrating on the ones that get accepted and funded is a very helpful delta to understand that it's not always institutional knowledge, but usually valuable if you can get your hit rate up from 28% to 40%. Okay.
Other observations about all of that? No, slightly stunned silence, I think is the short way to describe that reaction. Look, that's been a bit of a whirlwind and a tour de force. So my suggestion is, we're a little early, but my suggestion is we might take the coffee break, unless you want to move on to the next one.
I think most of there will be staff tuning in at 11, so sticking to the 11 o'clock start time for the next session, I think might be appreciated if you're all right with that.
Sounds like coffee.
Sounds like
Yeah.
coffee, and the thought processes which are grinding away up here will result in questions out there, so. All right, we'll do that, thank you. So we'll come back in a couple of minutes.
I'm just gonna-
So, John.
Maybe when Gina was on leave, my memory of like conceptual timelines, so I think it's probably 2 years ago.
And gentlemen,
Yeah.
the aforementioned, the aforementioned hour. We're hoping that a number of the staff will join for this item. So hence the slightly extended coffee break. So I can tell from the volume of discussion that was a productive time, which is fantastic. So let's get on, shall we, to the next item that we have on our agenda, which is the IHME team report. And obviously well known to all of us, Laurent and Kelsey will take us away. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jane, and good morning or good afternoon to everyone who's watching and those present in the room. Here's an outline for our conversation today. And then we'll start off with our diversity survey updates. We continue to observe diversity trends across our institute and across our staff. Looking pretty good across these areas that we're sharing today. It's important for us to share that we do not track this information to meet any kind of quota. This kind of work is simply for us to do three things really: to encourage our global lens here at IHME, to also ensure that our institute reflects the population and the communities across the world that we serve, and to ensure that everybody has a voice regardless of background or identity. Same information in another way, and doing well in terms of our responses. 83% so far been accumulative, and so we're grateful for that. I think last year we were at around 70, and so we're grateful for that. Here's where IHME staff live, about 35 states, most notably, obviously, Washington, California, Oregon, New York, Colorado. Yeah, so we're doing pretty well, approximately 35 states, total 469. Over to Kelsey.
One of the things that Laurent and I wanted to highlight with our team report this year was that in addition to making a lot of advances around the diversity and kind of the breadth and depth of our staff, we are experiencing somewhat unprecedented times. We are trying very hard to bring a unified front in terms of the different programs and ways that we're able to support our staff. But just a few of the examples of the ways that our staff has been feeling particularly affected. One has been the federal policy and budget shifts. We talked about this a little bit in a few of our discussions yesterday, but the FY26 budget has proposed a 40% cut to NIH and consolidating 27 institutes into 8. The restructuring of the CDC also has some implications on the focus areas for IHME. Public health research and data infrastructure are being prioritized in favor of a narrower biomedical agenda, and the federal scrutiny of higher education in the US in general is causing stress amongst our staff. Our proposal development team in particular has been doing a really wonderful job helping us navigate these changes. The UW medicine community and particularly leadership there has been really instrumental in providing a lot of communication and transparent guidance to the UW community. And in particular with the changes in processing for not just our proposals, but also in our renewals and no cost extensions, our staff in general, FP&O team has been really comforting, I think, to the staff who are trying to navigate these somewhat stressful times. The government and funding reductions as well have been an item that we've talked about quite a bit in terms of ways that we might help to alleviate and at least communicate the impact on the organization. the 8% reduction in the state of Washington budget that's targeted at the University of Washington might have some implications in our work. And an additional, the money that we've lost to date from the CDC and the US Census Bureau grants is something so far we've been able to adapt with or absorb within IHME, but we have some additional direct costs that are at risk as well. So in light of some of these uncertainties, Laurent and I are going to talk as well about some additional programs and policies that we've been trying to extend to help support our community.
A few things to highlight. Don't have time to highlight everything. It's important to note that IHME still has a very active and robust employee resource group community. 11 active ERGs, which range from disability visibility, rainbow, geography, parents and caregivers, Black at IHME, BIPOC, so on and so forth, a few others. And so they have been going strong. It's important to note that all are supported by S&T sponsor and all have good dialogue with them. It's one of the things that we did relaunch was a disability visibility ERG. It took a break for a little while, just looking for new leadership. We were able to reactivate that. And also a few months ago, we launched our Latina Dad ERG due to the outcry, positive outcry of our staff. So we're up to 11. We have adopted over the past 18 months, probably, an open to all inclusive language and policies. This was really helpful when UW and UW Medicine started to audit a lot of the DEI activities on campus. Sarah McCormick, myself, and Kelsey reached out to see what we had going on, what our nomenclature was, what our messaging was. And we're pleased to report that the report we got back based on what we had done at IHME was that we were ahead of most of the campus and we had to make no changes. We were recommended no changes, whereas so many other entities on campus were recommended to make changes in their nomenclature. And so we're grateful that we were already in the right vein. And that goes back to speak to our reason at IHME for the DEI work. We have begun to develop an ERG dashboard to track progress and impact so individuals can communicate, so individuals know what's taking place, so that we can ensure that we're on the same page, so that efforts are not duplicated, and so that collaboration also becomes key, which is a core value for us at IHME. Remote at IHME is the largest ERG, 55 members, and a Slack community of 165. Location ambassadors are a new initiative where individuals find time to connect under leadership as a part of those ERGs. Virtual water cooler chats. Individuals can have informal conversations. Continued voice for remote access to IHME-wide events. We continue to seek input as it relates to how we can integrate, how we can ensure that individuals who are in the 34 other states can ensure that they are connected and feel a part of what we do at IHME, not just from 9 to 5, but also beyond. Finally, for me, the DI Council carved out some intentional time with managers and team leads. There are about 40 team check-ins that helped us to understand any positives, any obstacles faced in advancing our global and inclusive mission. And there you see some successes and some challenges. This was well received from individuals, and it's something that I think we'll continue to do every year, just as a check-in. Not everything was actionable, but there were many things that were actionable, and they are in flux. This is really a continuation of how we're supporting our staff, listening sessions, check-ins. We did see some repetitive themes. IHME staff are very grateful for clear weekly updates from Chris and the SMT. We're seeing a lot of positive feedback about responsive communication from IHME team leadership. And then also individuals voiced their positive affirmation for the continual support they've been receiving from the People and Performance team. For those of you that don't know what People and Performance is, that's our version of HR, and also ODT, which Kelsey leads, and the team members that comprise those teams.
So other ways we continue to support our staff through attempts at increasing efficiency and opportunities for collaboration, perhaps a slightly less sexy launch, but our launch of 15.5 happened in January this year. It's a collaborative platform and work management tool. In other words, we now are doing our performance reviews not on Word documents, but via an online system. Our staff is in the middle of this right now, so I will not give you feedback at this moment, but in a couple months when it's behind us, I'm sure the reviews will be glowing. In addition to the performance management component of this tool, we are also shifting to an objectives and key results mechanism for our portfolio management. This was a long time coming in terms of just the gradual evolution of IHME, with an understanding that it is quite useful for our teams to have a little bit more visibility into the work of the different sub-teams and primary teams within the organization. OKRs is a well-known methodology that's used quite a bit in the private sector as well, but it turns out it's quite amenable to the research and development and engineering that we do here at the organization. We are also in the middle of our first scoping process that will be used with this framework. So again, I will not give any reports on it now, but next year I'm sure we will all be enthusiastic converts. We're again very grateful to the infrastructure team for helping us not only select this platform, but it's a multi-team effort in not only the launch, but the support of the organization members for using this. Everyone within the organization has access to it. It is a weekly tool that allows for check-ins with managers as well as check-ins with the team. And you also are able to see all the way from an individual contributor all the way up to a team lead, all the way to Chris, at any given moment, what a team's objectives are, where they are in their progress, and the interdependencies that they're linked to. So we're hoping this will just be a useful building block in IHME becoming an even more transparent and openly communicative organization. A few other ways that we have really up-leveled the way that we've been helping to grow the organization. We've been expanding the ways that we think about how we might contribute and collaborate with organizations around the world. We've launched a new fellowship this year. Emanuela was at the PMAC conference earlier in February of this year, launching a fellowship that would help us recruit talent internationally to come to IHME and help be a broader part of our research network. We talked a little bit yesterday, Marie is here now today, but we're looking forward to expanding a collaboration with the National University of Singapore that will also help us expand not only the way that we build research, but the way that we impart capacity and collaboration with other entities. VIN is a similar model that we talked about, VIN University. The Indian Council on Medical Research Fellows was a fellowship that ended last year, really instrumental in helping us understand what the most effective way was to actually build academic and research partnerships with global entities. And so our GBD fellowship actually was founded partially on that. And last, just a quick update on our IHME contributors. Last year, we reported that we had undergone a process to really vet and increase the number of contributors that worked with IHME. These are separate from our collaborators, which we talked about earlier this morning, but these are individuals that work closely with IHME within their different home institutions and actively contribute to the research that we do here at the organization, while also being embedded within their home organizations and being able to carry out the work there as well. We now have a much more standardized process for not only vetting these contributors, but establishing work plans for them and making sure that they're embedded well with their IHME teams. And then once they leave or once they return back to their other occupations, we maintain a closer relationship with them so that we're able to continue that collaboration over time. So we're really excited at the expansion of this particular program. It's a really effective way, I think, to build out institutional capacity building with a lot of effort from our research teams. We also, over the last year, have learned a lot about ways that we might help to continue training our partners. We've started differentiating our learners quite a bit. This is both our internal learners and external learners. We've been deploying our online trainings a lot more strategically. Historically, the main way that we've been building capacity has been through one-on-one lectures or workshops where we've had to send several of our research team members either to a country or to a meeting or even through online meetings, really taking up a lot of their time for these bespoke different learning and training opportunities. But we started now reducing that effort and instead creating a larger suite of online trainings, particularly for learners at our introductory level. So you'll see on our website, and I'll show you in a moment, that we've really leveled up the different offerings that are available to people that are just starting to learn more about the fundamentals of IHME and the GBD in particular. And then we're using our opportunities to convene our staff and our faculty for that external capacity building and meeting a little bit more frequently or a little bit less frequently, but a lot more strategically. We're also hoping to pull together all of our materials and media into one platform that helps people that visit the organization's website be able to access our resources a little bit more carefully. This year, I think Kara mentioned earlier that we launched our GBD Writing Center. This is a really useful resource that learners can take asynchronously, which means no interaction with a live instructor, but they're able to progress all the way through the different steps of writing a GBD paper. There's a linked resource to this that helps people learn how to do GBD relevant systematic reviews. And this is a center that's constantly being built onto with additional resources that's particularly useful for people in our network who are hoping to write a publication but aren't able to get as much time with experts or haven't written a publication in the past. This is a great place for them to start. A few other online trainings that we've launched recently. This is just a snippet from a few of our publicly available trainings that are useful and particularly in response to questions that we get from our GBD collaborators about certain methodologies or how to use our tools that have reduced the amount of time that our instructors and faculty members are taking doing one-on-one or one-off instruction or just guidance. So another mechanism I think that's been particularly effective in helping build capacity without using an awful lot of our subject matter experts' time. When we do deploy our staff to in-person events, we try to be really careful about what the learning objectives are for those individuals. So we now have a foundations workshop template, particularly for GBD. This is very useful for those learners on the second level of the pyramid there. And we now have a much easier way for when our faculty or subject matter experts travel to provide instruction on GBD, they're able to take these templates, customize them a little bit more quickly and deliver the content without a lot of novel production. So just another way I think we've been helping to support that learning. Just some final thoughts from us and looking ahead. We know that this is a particularly uncertain time for our staff. We have a lot of opportunities, I think, to build on our success. Our staff has really shown their resilience in the last year, and they'll continue to do so. And this picture is from our Health Metric Sciences graduation just last week. We graduated 7 students, 4 master students and 3 PhD students. A great representation around the world and of different interests as well. Even though they were graduating, I think, in the midst of an extremely uncertain time, the optimism that was professed by them and by the faculty and the staff that were supporting them, many of these folks are already embedded within IHME in staff or academic positions, was really reassuring and I think a very useful reminder that the work we do is more important now than ever and just really well timed, I think, in preparation for our board meeting and just a general positive moment for our staff to be able to come together and celebrate these graduates. So that's what I have for now. Anything else from you, Laurent?
That was great. I think we've covered everything. Open to any questions?
You look great with your white tie.
I was just going to say, I think an explanation of the dress code
Yes.
for those who don't speak fluent academic English.
Oxford.
Oh, I know that. I know that.
You're required to wear the white coat.
I know. I know.
Interesting, London has the same gown almost, but you don't wear the white coat.
Yes, Simon. Anything on the dress code?
I just want to point out that both of those white ties are Chris's because I'd lost mine years ago.
Comes prepared.
I had a question on the second slide about the language support.
The ADA?
Yes, what are we
Yes.
actually supporting?
If I'm correct in interpreting what you're asking, there were some concerns about how to ensure that we do what we need to do to support kind of ADA processes, American Disability Act. And so sometimes it's been a little fuzzy, different messaging coming from main campus. And so ensuring that we're balancing what messaging we're receiving with what we're able to do here or what we're not able to do here has created a little bit of confusion, but we've worked together through it pretty harmoniously, even though some of this being under ambiguity.
Okay, but it's part of the ADA.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I would just add to that, that there was an executive or ADA they issued a thing that said by April 2026, our university websites need to go from a gold star ADA rating to a double gold star ADA rating. So the University of Washington has been coordinating that centrally across all the website assets they have. But to Laurent's point, then there are specific things that IHME can or needs to do or maybe doesn't need to do on our specific websites outside of that central coordination as well to meet that deadline.
Is that all that work?
I think that Sarah may be able to speak more to that, because a lot of that comes under people performance. I'm not quite sure of the workload of that, but I do know that communicating it consistently is quite important. Sarah just came on, so maybe she can speak to that.
There she is. Sarah.
Hello. Yeah, no, I can't speak to the website. I think that anytime that there's ambiguity around policy, there could be games of telephone. And so it's just having consistent communication to our staff on a regular basis about resources and things that are available to them. And then having one-on-one conversations when people want a deeper dive into what that looks like. So I don't think it's excessive on that part. I think the website build is a little bit more labor intensive.
Yeah, the issues there are, the biggest time intensive issue we need to solve for is being able to do low vision readers support. You can imagine trying to make all of our charts and graphs interpretable by somebody with low vision is a significant challenge.
Other issues in relation?
Thank you. Well, just more a general point, because of the attacks on DI, my recommendation is that we stop using the acronym.
Yeah.
The acronym that has been weaponized. First of all, I'm in general opposed to TLAs, three-letter acronyms.
There you go, baby.
Yeah, no, acronyms are actually a way of excluding people because you need a translator, right? But anyway, quite apart from that, in this case, what's being weaponized and become the target of all these these attacks are the letters, the acronyms.
You're very clear.
And instead, I'm urging people to take the time to use the full words and explain what they mean. Diversity, what does it mean? What is the opposite of diversity? It's uniformity. Is that what you want?
White men.
Equity is, explain what it means. It means everyone deserves a fair chance in life. Good. And just say it. Inclusion, what's the opposite? Exclusion, who would you exclude? And then differentiate the values, which are the three words, from the practices, which is what's been attached to the DI acronym. And then examine critically some of the practices. Some of the practices should be changed, I think. And we are a university, we should be able to exercise our powers of critical thinking, direct them to ourselves, and see if some of the things we have been doing, the practices, not the values. This is the way I have found that we navigate and stay true to our values despite the attack, but don't make it easy for the opponents to actually, by making a caricature of what we do, actually undermine the values, which is what we ought to be defending rather than some specific practices that have evolved in many universities. I don't know if it's the case here, that I think are open to review. That's just a recommendation.
No, it's a great recommendation, and it is a conversation that Chris and I have had several times, Michael and I have had a few times. And I will say that the DEI Council is heavily behind this and support.
You just said DEI.
The Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Council is fully behind this. And now you do raise a point that I don't know if we have talked about. The first half of your statement is where we are. We have not said, okay, we'll stop using the 3-letter acronym and only use the words in full. And so that may be something that we have to talk about. The only hesitation that we have talked about is getting ahead of the university. And that's been the only kind of obstacle to making any changes. But the DI Council is, the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Council is in full support of making any nomenclature changes and being flexible as we need to be.
So I'm gonna.
You get any guidance from the university?
Keep on doing what we're doing so at this time.
So
That's where we are.
right. But isn't there a genuine discussion, to Julio's point? There is now a phrase, and I agree with you about acronyms, by the way, I really hate.
But in general, not just on this.
No, not just on this, exactly. But the reality is, it's now taken to mean something which in practice, in the way we all seek to behave to each other in a workplace, to mean something that is not actually what reflects what the values are. So the question about whether, and this isn't walking away at all from the underlying values and principles, is it maybe time to find another way to describe the values and principles in terms of how that's reflected in terms of how the staff understand what our values and principles are. And we shouldn't try and solve this as a problem now, but I think Julio's point is really valid. It's come to mean something which I don't think is consistent with any of the values I hear and see around here, which I don't think any of us hold. Do you know what I mean? So maybe that's a time to revisit. And I really liked what you said about how the language, and I would just be interested to hear another minute or two when you talked about the way the language has been used, so it's open language. Could you give us an example of what that actually sounds like?
Absolutely. So if we take, for example, Rainbow at IHME, that meetings and that group is not only for individuals who identify as such, but all who may be interested in learning or who may be interested in supporting. It is literally open to all. Now, there are some guidelines in terms of, hey, if you're coming into this space, we do require some behavioral guidelines and some respectful, absolutely safe spaces, respectful guidelines. But overall, we want to ensure that anyone who would like to come is available to come.
Our allies may join too.
Absolutely, absolutely. With some.
Actually, that's critical, from a legal point of view.
It has been crucial for us.
And it enriches.
Of course.
I think that our nomenclature that we use on the hub and on some other elements were key in us IHME being noticed and seen as, oh, yeah, no changes need to be made here. You're doing pretty well.
Very good. No, but it's great work.
Yeah. Anyone else? People? No? Any reactions from staff, just very briefly? Does that resonate? Yeah. For the purposes of people listening, not looking, there were head nods. Speaking of inclusion. All right, thank you guys, really appreciate it.
Thanks.
Okay. So. Thanks. Thanks.
Goodbye. You can catch up. Wait.
Oh, we're gonna miss you.
Yeah. Jake and me.
Okay.
Yes. Yes. Knock off. Does that? Yes. No, he's gone. Yeah, he's going to Alaska. I could break into song at this moment, but I should restrain myself.
All right.
So we're missing two over there. But you know what?
We can do this. All righty. So can we turn now to the Independent Advisory Committee report? And I'm hoping an iPad has joined. An iPad has joined.
Adam Pio.
Dad
Yeah,
and
hi everybody.
Pio. So
Hello
did
from
some,
Brussels.
Peter, did some child set that up for you, Dad? MPPO, or is that your version of a joke?
Oh, no, it's me.
I got it. You can do that now, but your iPad was identified. Pio.
He doesn't know what you're talking about.
No, you don't know what.
What does the iPad say? I have no idea.
That's probably the issue.
Yeah, so your name is clear, but when you first came on, your iPad has an intriguing label. Dad, MP.
Ah, yeah. Oh, yeah. That's the code of the London School of Hygiene. I mean, that's my staff code. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. I don't know if that's worse or better than having your children set it
The
up.
D is director. It's still old, but anyway, that's yeah.
Excellent.
Okay.
And where do we find you today, Peter?
Brussels at home, so you can see my garden. So that's and the roses and all that. You know, it's
Beautiful.
it's still light here, even if it's whatever it is, 8:30 p.m. like in Seattle. Yeah.
Excellent. All right. Well, welcome. We've had a busy meeting so far, but we're back on time and looking forward. And obviously, we've read the report, but looking forward to your outline in relation to the Independent Advisory Committee.
Yes. Thanks, Jane, and good morning, everybody. Right, as is the tradition every year, I'll give a brief report on what we've been doing. And can I have the next slide, please, Kelsey? Yeah, thanks. Just as a reminder, on the left side, you can see the membership, which was renewed last year, and with a number of new people, particularly trying to get more AI type of experience and expertise. Lothar Wieler, who was the previous head of the Robert Koch Institute in Germany, the National Public Health Institute, but now leads Europe's biggest digital health and AI academic group in Berlin. And Mustafa Sisse, who ex-Google, but who is now has a startup AI in Senegal, and is one of the leaders on this field in Africa. And then also Lisa Munira, who is was from the Ministry of Health in Indonesia, where they're starting to use GBD. And we also have some junior members. One is Lisa Lin from Hong Kong, and we've had some observer also. Next, just as an introduction, we're meeting twice a year, and last year we met in Mexico, and we had, as traditionally, what we do then when we go outside Seattle is to have a day with the local investigators and end users of the GBD. Rafael Rosell was our host, and here we see some event at the Autonomous University of Mexico. Next slide, please. So the day itself, we were quite impressed with what's going on in Mexico, with people who came from all over the country, from the various states, and how they're using it. But in general, our what we thought was that there was something that we've been asking about, but is the good progress on the enormous GBD collaborator network, as you know, and especially the introduction of the various categories, the rankings, the tiering, which we feel is very helpful. And also we are very, the group feels strongly that regional hubs are really important, and we come back to that later. And then for also, we had a discussion to use DALIS as a key metric rather than mortality for a number of areas, including climate change and education or low education. And I will come back to that. Our group feels very strongly that an annual report and update of GBD has hardly any chance of having policy impact, and that we really recommend strongly that it would be every 2 or 3 years, with some in between then forecast estimates on specific issues, for example. And we were very impressed by the one mode, and so next slide, please. I'm sure all these things you've been discussing, so I'm sorry if I repeat everything. We had on both meetings of the last 12 months spent quite some time on AI. It's work in progress. Our team with Sarah Curran and Edmund Ng have been exploring the options and opportunities. And you'll see here that it's really the inclusion of data sets of various quality, of course, to refine AI, because we feel that it's not yet ready for to use. And some people think that the GBD work can just be replaced by AI. We are not as optimistic, although one day this will come, probably. And also look at the cost benefit and the cost of the AI. Again, something we've been talking about since the beginning of our existence is the education. And we stressed low education as a risk factor. And then we had a whole discussion, what is the cutoff, the minimum risk exposure, etc., that we felt that 18 years of education is not realistic in environments. Next slide. And please, if you have a question, just shout, because I can see the group, but that's it. And then we really certainly recognize the complexity of social determinants. And we, just as for other determinants and risks, that we suggested to have some tiers, and with now a new level 1 risk category. Had long discussions about the scenario building. We had planned a scenario workshop, but to be led by Chor-Fan Lee, who is the strategic advisor of the Prime Minister in Singapore, but unfortunately he could not attend last meeting because of illness. So that will come back later on. And we are big fans of the star rating system, but we also believe that it's not only for GBD's own work, but also the incidence and prevalence and DALIs that that are being used or come out, and that they are of variable strength. So that's something that we didn't have a very concrete proposal, but it's something work in progress. Very impressed by the disease expenditure network work, and that's will be a topic for the deep dive for this year. Also, see how that can be applied to other countries, where, of course, the existence of detailed individual data sets and electronic patient records is extremely important. And then, so that's the, can we have the next slide? Yeah, next one, please. Yeah, and then last month, we had a hybrid meeting, and where it was mostly online format. This was imposed by the Gates Foundation for cost savings, but we strongly feel that it reduced our impact, efficacy, and a contribution by at least 80%. You can give a star rating on that, but it's something between 70 and 95%. and that we will only have in-person meetings in the future and rather have none than do it that way, because the essence of our work requires interactions and discussions, and it's not just commenting on on slides, because most of what we do doesn't have like a yes or no answer. It requires interaction, and many of us, including myself, during the course of a discussion, we can really change our mind, or we can develop what our recommendation is. We're very impressed by the population density work, and and really recommend to continue that and explore that further. Also, much appreciation for the targeted outreach to areas with lower levels of collaboration. Very excited about the new regional center, particularly the one in Singapore with the National University of Singapore, and the ASEAN paper series, which will come out. Also the paper that came out of Japan. So these are all indicators and concrete proofs of the impact of the GBD beyond the publication in the Lancet and influencing Gates Foundation policy. Next slide, please. Where are we? Okay, here. Yes, a big issue is, of course, the ODA decline and development assistance for health, where IHME has been tracking this for many years, and it's the reference, even more than OECD, I should say. We've been using this a lot, I mean, personally also, to track the historic trends. And it's clear that, as a comment here, that we've coming out of about 25 years of probably what was a historic anomaly of increasing the age at the end of the 90s, a bit and at a higher level, driven by the AIDS movement in the first place, and then a bit of a peak with COVID, and then it started declining. And the question now is, at what level will it plateau? But we doubt that it will come back. But so this tracking, we feel, is extremely important and has been very, influential. Also, the analysis that the IHME has been doing on attributing health outcomes on investments and spend is going to be extremely important in, in policy debates, but also in prioritization, where to concentrate our, international funding and national funding. The 1 month subnational work, on the one hand, we say it's a sea change, it's a breakthrough, a very good, and the subnational elements are extremely important for national policies, but we're also, concerned, or we say we should be careful and slowly rolling it out for if this would be used or abused by, others. So that requires some careful management, and I assume you will have discussed that as well. And to use AI for training development and so on. So all this will make data quality analysis also more granular, and it will be really a very powerful tool, we believe. Next slide. Yeah, and then we had quite a session on AI led by Mustafa Sisse, I wouldn't say that we came up with a very strong, clear recommendations. It is really a dialogue with Chris and his team, and Steve Lin, but some 3 general recommendations came out of it's something that for the future of IHME and GBD is going to be absolutely key, as for many other things, institutions and activities, and that developing new partnerships beyond the ones that already exist, and to help bring core AI expertise into GBD. It's unlikely that the it would be financially possible to have a lot of great AI expertise as staff, given the competition, certainly in Seattle, but partnerships of all kinds will be really important. There's a proposal for an AI residency program in IHME with individuals who are working in some of these companies. There are some of our members have experience in that, including Lothar Wieler and in Europe, and Mustafa Sisse from his Google experience. And then see how one can incentivize partners to share alternative types of data. Something our group also feels that if we just go for Ministry of Health data and so on, we are missing a lot. And so this is where AI could help as well. Next slide, please. I think we're nearly, yeah. And then two more, and that is one is that so-called deep dive of the group. As I mentioned, this year will be on the health expenditure work. It's Mike Clark, who is the former dean of the Johns Hopkins School of Public Health, the Bloomberg School of Public Health, and with a former ISC member and a health economist, Bruce Hollingsworth. They are, they had meetings and to see what to do, because there is sky is the limit here. And it was discussed with IHME members how what to focus on, and how the main underlying idea is to see the potential for this kind of work for low middle income countries, and how that can be done in a realistic way. And so we'll talk about that at the next meeting. Next slide, please. That's the last one. So our next meeting is in October in Tokyo. And as always, the main reason is that there is activity in Japan now, which was not there till recently. Proof of that is a major paper that came out in the Lancet in, I think it was February or March, can't remember. On Japan with a whole set of new collaborators. So it has been grounded and fully owned by the Japanese, and the Ministry of Health is starting to use it. And we'll start it with a day, on the one hand, the morning will be opened by Dr. Takemi, some of you may know, former Minister of Health and under Minister of Foreign Affairs, and a leading voice for global health in Japan, and in the Liberal Democratic Party. So that will be, he's chairing this executive committee on global health and human security with members of the Diet, ministry, civil society, academia, and then have the rest of the day with various investigators from Japan. So that's that's all. And any questions? Happy to to respond.
Okay, thanks, Peter. I might actually first ask Chris whether you want to make any observations about that raft of recommendations before I invite any questions or comments.
No, I mean, we've had lots of discussion with Peter and the IEC about them, and as always, try to incorporate some of them or many of them into our next cycle of work. So we'll be the same in this case.
Yeah, okay, good. Questions or observations? No? Sally, anything from you? No, pretty clear, I think. Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, Peter. I think.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Enjoy the rest of the meeting. Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Yeah, bye.
So do you have the term, this committee, they get renewed every?
They do. Where's Kara? What's the term? What's the term on the committee members?
I think on the committee members, I think they reevaluate with each new grant cycle, and it's usually a 3-year grant cycle.
Well, how long is this grant
I think
last?
we're in the first year, we're like finishing the first year of this
One
cycle.
more year or?
1 or 2 more years.
I think as part of the we have to have a conversation, you know, in the era of cost cutting at Gates, whether, what their plan is for the IC.
But who appoints them?
You do, we do, you do.
I'm not in that cycle yet, I guess.
Although we tend to do it, the executive committee.
Maybe it's executive.
I think it's
Maybe it's
executive.
You cannot
It's
independent, if it's independent, you can't.
Yeah.
Well, it's independent of IHME, but not independent of you.
Shall I?
Yes, please.
Okay,
I had a profound thought and it probably disappeared, which shows it wasn't profound. so-
It'll reappear before you get on the
Come
plane.
back,
Uh,
when it's profound
The
again.
Global Business Unit Advisory Board, I had the privilege of chairing and reporting back on here are the individuals that's meant to offer guidance on the direction and be useful to IHME and advisory to the board in terms of global expansion and global presence. Kelsey Bannon, I want to make note, is always invited ex officio and pivotal to the conversations we have from our point of view and perspective at IHME. So 3 things, certainly appreciative of the cooperation amongst IHME, School of Medicine leadership, and the Provost Office to make it possible to now there's a commitment to our IHME being able to hire faculty in different titles located in different countries. That it's welcome flexibility. That's flexibility that almost all other units across the entire university do not have. There's one other precedent that we know of. So does not mean it needs to be used all the time, but it definitely is a flexibility that could be very strategically beneficial.
You want to elaborate, Michael, what different titles means exactly?
Yes, I'm pausing only to try to simplify the conversation.
Flexibility.
So there's a labyrinthian set of faculty and academic appointment titles at the university. Many, in fact, I suppose all governed by the faculty code. And they have various restrictions on them. So that in the past, we have only been able to use a very tiny subset that were annual renewals for something called clinical faculty. Kelsey, am I correct there? Which meant that we had to actually have somebody with a terminal clinical degree in them. And we're very limited as where they could be. This now means that we have the full array of titles open to us. It also means that we can employ many more different types of funding mechanisms for them than we were able to before. I can get into details, but that, okay. We recognize IHME has a long history of partnership with different organizations, right back to July 2007 when this institution was begun. We recognize that there's been some key takeaways about those, particularly in the past couple of years, which has been a useful exercise for IHME. We don't need to go through the key takeaways here in particular, but just to note that, you know, the board stands ready to help with any of these as possible or needed. Do think it, you know, speaks to if there are ways to be helpful with University of Singapore Riverhead, if we need the advisory board to do so, it can be. Also speaks to the idea of not getting hyper customized, because, you know, we agree IHME should speak to its core strengths. Takeaways. And then finally, also with consultation with the School of Medicine leadership and the provost, there's a lot of changes in the global health landscape at the moment. IHME did with Diego's health, in fact, and others, global assessment global presence assessment. The first one was in 2019, and the strategy around that was refreshed by IHME in 2021, which then ultimately led to the creation of the Global Business Advisory Board. It seems useful, and the School of Medicine leadership provost have suggested that IHME undertake another one of these. That is, we think, to IHME's advantage to do so. The board had been asked, the advisory board was mentioned by School of Medicine leadership and the provost as the appropriate folks to then help consult on that, which I think positions IHME well. And so we're simply saying that focusing on some of the same attributes that were been in the first two versions of this strategy. What makes for desirability of places and presence, what are associated success indicators, the avenues for achieving them, and risk mitigation are worth mirroring going forward. That's what's been productively deployed in the past. So, and Jane, other things you would like to add as a member?
No, I think that's a fair coverage.
Questions on any of it?
Questions or other issues?
Looks like a good idea. And fantastic, the support you get from the School of Medicine in flexibility and everything, so good on them.
And our new, well, now 1 year, provost.
Provost is
is
super supportive.
being much more supportive, I would say.
Good.
As her predecessor.
Your predecessor, yes.
Why is it called business development? Why is it called business advisory board?
I don't know.
Because Central asked us if we would be willing to name it as such.
Okay.
I think their logic was that they perceive this advisory board as seconding authority to you as a board. The same as the regions have seconded authority. So there's a bunch of decisions then that the advisory board can say, yes, this seems like it makes sense for IHME. But that they protect themselves from making the decision for the whole rest of the university. So that's a range of business functions, strategic issues, et cetera. And I think they're very intentional about trying to make that point.
Which is all to the good.
Yeah. It's an awkward name, but we have lots of awkward names within IHME. Yeah.
It included the word global.
It includes the word global, so we're on point for Dave's suggestion.
Very far-sighted.
Yeah.
We're on brand.
All right,
Just
anything
escape.
else? No, nothing else? Excellent, thank you.
Great, yeah.
All right. I think you now.
It is me now, and I think I will ask you to turn your attention. I may not use the slides.
You want me to pull them up or no?
We can have 7.
6 is the resolution.
Yeah.
Earlier.
Five work?
It's 5, yeah.
All right, so before we go to the plan of work, maybe we can use the challenge slides, just put them up. I was gonna start with the challenges that we included. We'll talk about work. The objective of the year.
I love this. Most people talk about theories of change. We here have a theory of victory. I love it.
Well, for those of us who think that the term theory of change is a wank.
Well, I do.
It's not a polite term,
It's
it's
not a
an
polite
Australian
term.
colloquial term.
But it's obviously not Britain.
It is, and it is not a compliment.
It's clear.
Don't go there.
And I think my mother would. RTI course.
I agree. I wish I knew that word really.
No, I'll start here.
Sorry about that.
We identified some challenges for the year ahead, and then we can run through the objectives, just to put out the challenges, and then we can read the objectives in the document, which I'm sure you've seen. On our list of challenges that we called out, there are many others, but the ones that we called out is one that we're very concerned about, which is securing our data. We have found instances of people team is selling data that is not supposed to be public. And not only that, but where we've now been approached by the Lancet with papers that have already been submitted on non-public data that is causing great angst with the Lancet. So we really need to address this challenge.
And what is the solution, out of curiosity, for something that is not in the public domain and has manifestly then been?
I think the solutions that we're thinking about, and this is also what Peter's committee suggested as well, is that we no longer, first of all, we have better KYC procedures so that we have individualized passwords and identities, so we know who's getting data.
So that's the going forward solution.
Yeah.
I'm actually asking a question about something that's, I mean, it's not our decision, but do we have a view about the Lancet's position on a document that's been submitted?
Oh, they've just, they're asking us, and they completely are, they trying to investigate who these people are. So that they will not let them through, but the problem is that
They'll go somewhere else.
other journals are not gonna be as informed or on top of it. So we really need to have a management strategy. And in the future, I think we plan not to give unlimited access to tier 1 and 2 collaborators, right? This is another part of the strategy.
We've done that now.
Yeah. So there's that, securing the data. We need, as always, to balance the endless drive for methods innovation with making sure that we deliver on our product timeline. And that's nothing new, but always present. As we discussed in some earlier context, we can't use, as we scale up more GBD detail, which is the direction we want to go, more locations, our traditional highly human intense methods for review just won't scale. We're sort of hitting the limits of what we can achieve. And so we need AI to, we think, as we'll come to. We have a real issue on brand, which is these non-GBD collaborators churning out papers very fast, and the journals and readers not really being able to tell what's GBD versus not, right? Because they use they're so clever, they're not only use exactly the same style of language, they make the graphs that they make look exactly our template. So if you just open up an article that's written by one of these other groups, you would be really hard pressed. And if you're the journal of some other journal that don't know this, you would have no idea that.
Do we think they're being reduced by AI?
It could be being produced by AI. It also is maybe, we know that there are people writing the papers and then selling authorship on them. So that's another model. So we're a slightly a victim of our own success, right? Where people are trying to emulate, and we just need to get control of this because it's a real brand threat.
Chris, can you geolocate them, or they do it in such a way for which you don't know where they are?
We mostly know that they're from Chinese institutions, not exclusively, but the vast majority. And the part of that is
for Chinese consumption or global consumption?
It's for most universities in China have an incentive scheme, so that if you publish in a top 5 journal, The Lancet, you get a very substantial financial payment from the university. So it's just creating this ecosystem where people want to publish. This is a mechanism to get a top tier.
And would a mechanism for which you agree with Lancet that anything that comes from China needs to be officially validated by you guys?
Well,
sorry, I'm probably oversimplifying and
Yeah, we are in ongoing discussion with Richard Horton on what are the mechanisms to try to guard against this. Less progress, I'd say, on some of the other, the like JAMA or Nature, the Nature family. So we'll.
So if their incentive scheme is around the top 5 journals.
Well, I forget, it depends on the university, I believe,
Okay.
but certain others, Lancet, New England Journal of Science, Nature,
Right.
and probably JAMA.
That's probably,
So it is a manageable number of
That's-
publications.
that's the point, yeah.
The ones for which there's,
The ones that matter, I mean.
I don't know, but Simon is our expert on all things publication.
Yeah, just wanted to say that just to get the balance right in the public forum, there are many of these papers coming from Chinese individuals. We have very many long-established great Chinese collaborators that are publishing brilliant papers and have done for a long, long time. What we must ensure that we do is not treat everybody
Absolutely.
and just for public consumption, and just making sure we get that out. And China CDC has been a long term.
How many of those collaborators are that you would see as high quality? Again, I'm not asking for precision, I'm asking like dozens, thousands?
Dozens.
It is still a manageable number.
Yes. And then, yes, very good point. And not just China CDC.
No.
Peking University or Taiwan.
And as an observation, I would be surprised if the Chinese authorities themselves would actually welcome people trying to game the system, right? I mean, in terms of the reputation, the academic reputation.
Very good point.
Do you know what I'm saying? So I wonder whether actually one of the things that we thought about is actually throwing a bit of a spotlight on this. Because at the end of the day, it's not in their interest either to actually have these people succeed and be rewarded for the behaviour. I mean, they're attempting, as I see it, to actually demonstrate a level of scholarly capacity. And this is not consistent with that ambition. It's a numbers game.
I think the trick here is we don't want to be the police.
No, we can't be. I completely agree.
That's what we want.
Publishing before we release the data, that's a totally different discussion. But once the data is out, Chinese university, how they do it, and they publish a good paper. I mean, we made the data public.
Oh, no. I think we're talking here about the example.
Pre-release.
Yeah, pre is totally different.
Yes, agreed.
For us to say Chinese, no.
No, but I think that's the point that Simon absolutely rightly makes. We already have a series of very able collaborators in China. That is all to the good. It's this other group.
And we want to increase it in the future when publish by all means.
Yeah. The journals get very anxious about this work. And I don't think the world needs 900 UV papers a year.
No, it might mask the major ones actually, but there we are, that's another issue. Yeah.
We probably need 500. Okay, so moving right along back to, those were the challenges in the plan of work. I'm not sure I need to read them all out. They're in tab 5. Do what?
We put them up for the external audit.
Oh, the external one. Thank you.
Thank you.
I forgot that.
I can do it.
Oh, I can do it here. Okay, there we go. Well, let's see. Wait, are we in the right?
Where are you now?
Well, those were before.
Those are what?
You should keep going.
These are,
That's one.
okay. So one objective is to roll out standardized methods. So we have quite a ambitious plan for GD 2025 that entails swapping over to a number of our new modeling tools. So that's one objective. We plan to fully complete the migration to burden of proof analysis. That's where we star rate the risk factors, publish the climate set of analyses we've talked about, release the gridded population and related covariates, and then do the development assistance analyses, and of course, support the Lancet Commission rollout. So that's in the category of new contributions to health intelligence. Continue our tradition of getting peer review for our new science and new methods. Leverage AI to implement, as long as we find the funding, to implement a number of AI solutions, that perhaps the most ambitious of which is the AI-based vetting and validation. And then as we've talked about, sticking an AI on top of the GBD data, which seems to have caught the attention of the Gates Foundation since Anita Zaidi was talking about at dinner last night.
Exactly.
And then start the process of our Lancet Commission on health system performance assessment, which I noticed that Julio is already off to the races on. So very enthusiastically.
Getting the band back together, Chris.
Getting the band back together, yes. We're gonna team up with Earth, Wind and Fire and do a tour.
You better explain to the majority of people in the room who they were.
Yeah, that's right.
Wrong generation, true.
Anyone have any idea down that end of the table? You do?
Oh.
They're coming to this
Yeah,
area.
they're going to see them.
Yeah, they're coming to Chateau Saint Michel this
Listen,
summer.
this weekend.
Thank you very much.
They're also a favorite of Kelsey Pierce's children. I can tell you they know the lyrics to many of the songs.
There you go.
I guess we might see you there.
There you go.
And it's actually living human beings, it's not like the adult projection thing.
There we go. So another objective is to sustain and cultivate our global audience. And we have a number of components to that, which includes what Kelsey mentioned in the previous presentation, which is to implement a knowledge management platform, which should make it easier for people to access both other sources and publications. And of course, launch GBD at the World Health Summit. Okay. Yeah.
It's just worth thinking in that one. If we've got a high-level meeting at the UN next September, no, it's this September, on non-communicable diseases, whether you should be getting the Lancet to, it's a bit close, isn't it? It's a summary about, the holes in this and what could be done or something.
I think, I don't know, it was Victor or somebody also mentioned, maybe it was you, that we should be getting the message about climate and NCDs into the
Yeah,
report.
that was me as well.
I don't know who's the sort of driving force there.
Perhaps we should get them welcome to set up a side event.
Also, during the Hunger Week, there's also a climate week. The whole week's on climate change run by the climate group. So we should make sure that you actually have a chance to connect with them.
Yeah.
I know you're gonna be invited to COP30, so you would at least have the health piece of COP30. I think you're well on your way.
Yeah, that'd be great if you can connect us, Victor, on the Ungo week. That would be
Okay.
The welcome might fund a side event for us.
Because that's the way to do it. I mean, because trying to do anything in the building is a disaster.
And then there's an AMR high-level meeting in 2029, so it's worth being aware of that.
29. That's a long-range planning.
Yeah, but I want it to be on your agenda. I expect it to be on your agenda.
All right. So another objective is around achieving an agile, accountable, ambitious, and resilient organization. Key to that is talent, so that's where the fellows program comes in. We want to have the compute environment that is supportive of the organization and make sure that we're getting the right AI tools to the teams. So for example, we've increasingly making some of the vibe coding tools available, which can be pretty transformative. Kimberly didn't mention that the interface that you saw on the systematic review, that interface was vibe coded. So the person who did it didn't really know how to code. So that's pretty neat. So scale that up, that has some pretty big effects. And then update our institutional risk assessments. And we will have a discussion on, our strategies for fundraising in the afternoon. Over to this.
Sorry, I have a question whose answer I should know, but I don't. How long in advance do you get secure funding in the Gates Foundation? And for how long?
So the funding for the Gates Foundation is in two buckets, right? One bucket is this 10-year core grant, of which we're towards the end of the second one, and thus the critical negotiation for the third core grant.
When is the third going to start from?
Somewhat also subject to negotiation. It will either start in the spring of 27 or in the fall of 26. Which I prefer the fall of 26, right? That sort of time frame. And then there are many, many smaller grants that are very topic specific. So, and they make up almost 20 million a year in those smaller grants. So those are very subject to ebb and flow, and they're usually.
How big was the last core?
The last core was 260. 260?
10 years.
10 years, ramping up so that we are now at 36 on the core.
Like it for close of FY 25, yes.
Yeah. I mean, 38 next year.
38, 39 next year, yeah.
38 off the core. And then there's a near core, small area mapping, geospatial type grant that some people at Gates think of as part of the core, and that's another number, which is closer to about 43.
Gates funding make up how much of the total budget?
Gates,
including our separate revenue.
54% this last year, 61% this coming year.
61 coming.
Yes, it's less in coming.
In the next 10 years, gonna be another award where it's still gonna be 60-40, or you expect to be?
Pretty volatile funding situation out there in the broader world, so
It's more difficult.
it's pretty hard to know.
I mean, I could see it going down or
But
going up.
trying to generate our own revenue, our own funding is obviously, it's a wise thing to do no matter what.
It is a very wise
Very
thing.
wise thing to do.
Yes.
We'll have that conversation or something.
Yeah, very, very wise. And that's why we'll hear from Bill.
Yeah.
Miraculous things that will happen.
No pressure.
So that is the key objectives.
Okay.
Questions, suggestions? Described in more detail in the documents.
Indeed.
Well done.
Yeah. All right, so that is the document on which we can, if people are comfortable, move forward to consider the resolutions. Do we have a slide? The resolutions?
Yeah.
In the document.
Do you think? Oh, it's in the book, yeah, I think we might have had it last time.
Six.
Yeah, six.
Pretty short.
Yes, I was going to say,
Pithy.
the board approves the IHME plan of work FY 26 as outlined in the enclosed document with this title. Is the resolution before us? So let me pick that resolution
need proposals on the 17th.
to the meeting? Well, I don't know that we do, but we can have one if you like. Happy to propose.
Yeah.
Anyone happy to second?
Second.
So John got in first. Thank you. He's quick.
I'm happy to yield.
He's quick. He's quick. All right,
Just tall.
everyone else in agreement?
Yeah.
Yes, so say us. All right, resolution passed. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
All right, that brings us almost to the conclusion of this formal meeting. We do have to just note, I think, for the records, the date for the next meeting, Kelsey, which we changed this morning. So the documents say 17/18
16, 17.
of June 26, and we're going to shift that to the 16th and 17th. Right, everyone's comfortable with that? All right, on that note, I think there's been a lot of material this morning in a short space of time. I'm very conscious that the work that is presented it's like sort of skimming across the top of mountains. You know that there's an enormous volume sitting beneath that peak. And we've had the benefit over the last day and a bit of seeing some of the detail. But again, and as I said this morning, we should acknowledge the work that goes in. And I think we should also acknowledge that it is a stressful time for people at the moment. We had the conversation about getting rid of that acronym and being true to our values and finding other ways to talk about what we do, which is true to our values. But I also think we should acknowledge that for staff, it is a pretty worrying time at the moment. And so I think the kind of support that we can give people at a time like this, albeit just acknowledging stress, I think is actually really important. So again, that's probably worth passing on to people that basically it's not easy for people. So is there any other business in respect to this formal part of the meeting?
I believe not.
I believe not. Kelsey, anything from you? Anything from the colleagues? All right. In which case, thank you. We will bring this formal part of the meeting to a close. We will suspend for lunch and we will return, well, in theory at 1:30. We might have a discussion about whether we can do that a fraction earlier. Maybe 1:15.
I've got a call.
Oh, do you? When do you come back?
1:30.
1:30. Okay, we'll come back at 1:30. We can go for another walk. All right, thanks everyone. We'll see those of you who are on the. Yes, I know. Okay.